Hi, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 3 easy peasy tips to succeed at your Zoom interview. For the purposes of this video, we're going to be focusing just on medical residency interviews, but you can really apply to anything. All right. So if that's something that's interesting to you, then just keep watching. Hi, I'm Dr. Shaw, and I am a rural family medicine resident in North Carolina. And on this channel, I share the realities of what it's like being a rural family medicine resident and the strategies that I learned along the way to my successful match. So in this video, we're going to be talking about some tips and tricks that I feel would be really helpful to improve your chances and improve the impression that you're making on the program that you're interviewing at. So the first tip is technical aspect. Okay, so technicals. You really need to make sure that you have a good internet connection, that people can hear you, and that people can see you. So that's very important. You'd be surprised how many times something so simple gets overlooked. It's because Zoom interviews are something that we haven't been doing as a society for very long. You're going to have sometimes technical difficulties. And what you want to do on the interview day is to minimize all the technical difficulties that you can from your end. And the easiest thing to do is to make sure that you're in a place with a good internet connection, because sometimes it's really frustrating when you're trying to talk to an applicant and the Wi-Fi and the internet keeps cutting in and out and you can't really quite understand what they're trying to say, and you just don't get a good understanding of who they are as a person if they can't communicate effectively. And again, that's something that's completely avoidable. Some strategies, if there are people who have difficulty accessing it, I would say that try to either book a room in the library or borrow a friend's or go somewhere quiet, or just see if there's a way that you can just access it. But just please make sure that you have good internet. And that's a huge thing. The second technical aspect is make sure that we can hear you. So sometimes, it kind of ties into the first point, because sometimes when you have terrible connection, you can't hear the person. Another reason why you can't hear the person is because the way that the mic has been placed on whatever device that you're using, it's covered by something. So just make sure that people can hear you. That will make a huge difference, because it actually adds a degree of sophistication and it makes it feel like you're actually there in person. So it makes a huge difference. Please do not neglect that portion. Something that's equally important is lighting. It's very important to make sure that people can see you. You don't need to have studio lighting with a fill light and all these different lights and a ring light. You don't need all that, but you need to be in a place where people can see you. And sometimes, that means that if you know that there's a room in your home that gets dark with the sunlight and stuff, make sure you have a night lamp or a regular lamp. Just make sure you have light, because it's so hard to see an applicant and get a good judge of who they are if you can't see them, or if you can't hear them, or the internet keeps breaking up. Sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised. The second tip is etiquette. It's very important to make sure that you showcase your personality in the best way possible by having a professional demeanor and good etiquette. What I mean by that in a virtual interview context is that treat this like it's a real interview. And I think that that's one of the hardest things for people to wrap their head around, is the fact that residency programs are actually treating this like it is an in-person interview. So several examples are: don't treat this any differently with regard to your clothes. Make sure you're wearing a full suit and full professional attire, because it looks so bad if you move and you see the person wearing pajamas. It just looks so ridiculous. You just feel like the person doesn't have good attention to detail, so it doesn't put you in a good light. And oftentimes maybe that's not really the case. It could just be that maybe you're like, oh, I'm gonna be comfortable in pajamas. Don't do it. Just don't. It just looks terrible. Okay, the next thing is you are being watched every minute and every move that you make. And I know this is pretty obvious when people are training for in-person interviews. It's pretty given, and I think most people are aware of that the moment you walk in the hospital, you are being watched. it's a little bit difficult to transition that mind frame into a virtual interview because you're not going anywhere. You're in a comfortable place, you're at home, and you don't actually have physical people there to be looking at you. So it's easy to forget that this is the same thing. Everybody's watching your moves, okay? So what that means is be pleasant, smile, don't look grouchy, don't look like you have better things to do than being here in this moment, because it comes across and it looks really bad. So just try to be very engaging and be present and make it obvious that you're present. The other thing is that, you know, a lot of us know, or we should, that, you know, typically when you go into an interview, you still have to be nice to the people that are receiving you, the administration, like the staff, that, you know, everybody, not just the people who are interviewing you, right? So I think that's pretty obvious, and it's pretty obvious when you're going in person, because, you know, when you walk in and you check in with whoever's at the counter, that, hey, I'm here, you're gonna talk to them, and there's a common area. So, you know, most people end up making small talk with the people that they're with. However, that seems like doesn't quite translate when it comes to like virtual interviews, and it's a huge like turn off. Okay, so one of the things is that they're mimicking real life interviews. So the way that my program does it, at least, is that all the people that get interviews, you get put into a common room. So if there are, like, let's say 5 or 6 people, they're being interviewed that day, everyone gets to be in the same room, just like you would in person. And we have our program director, Dr. Whitman, and some of the staff. They'll go through the same things that they typically would if it was an in-person thing. So, and then what happens is that you get broken off into different groups. So you have breakout rooms. Again, this is just like my program does it, so other programs might be different, but I suspect they're all pretty much similar. You have the main room, which is meant to be analogous to the waiting area, and then you get placed in breakout rooms with interviewers, and that's meant to be like the interview, right? So when you're in person and you come back to the lobby, you don't just shut down, or I hope you don't. You know, you're still engaging and you're, you know, professional and all the above. So similarly, in a virtual setting, it is not good if you just turn off your camera. It does not look good. If you have to go to the bathroom, that's fine. You can just say, if you'll excuse me, I just have to use the restroom, I'll be back. It shows that you treat other people with courtesy. Because at least in my program, we have the coordinators that are in the main lobby. So they're in the main room, and, you know, it's kind of rude to just, you know, if you're just one-on-one with someone, just to turn off your camera. It just doesn't come off that great, and you may not mean anything by it, but it doesn't come off great. So that's one thing to be very mindful of, is just to be very engaging to the people who you're interviewing with, obviously, but also the people who you're not interviewing with, because mark my words, you are being watched in every single movement. Even more so, I would say, in virtual interviews, because you don't actually get a good gauge of the person in the same way that you would in person. So we try to use what we can, you know. So make sure you're friendly, make sure you're polished, and you treat everybody with the same degree of respect and kindness. So the way that my program does, it's typically just like the residents. Some of the programs have some faculty, but mine doesn't. So there is some etiquette that is involved with the Q&A. Yes, it is more informal. You don't have to wear a 3-piece suit. Like, you don't have to wear a suit. You can if you want, but you don't have to. But I would personally recommend that you wear business casual, at least, just because it looks like you're taking this very seriously. And, you know, people who are residents, they don't have that much time, and they're taking time out of their day to talk to you. It's just a sign of respect, because it's not like well, at least we don't get paid to do interviews. I mean, it's fine, but, you know, it just is a sign of respect if you just dress like you cared. The other thing is make sure you have engaging questions, because I don't think there's anything worse than being forgettable. Given that residency is so competitive, you need to take every advantage of everything that you can. So I would suggest that prepare some questions, prepare intelligent questions that show that you've actually thought about what it would be like to live here, or like questions that you can't find on our website. So those are some things that are kind of important. Last thing, okay, so this is the after interview etiquette. So after an interview, what do? There's been like a lot of back and forth about what is good to do. Like, should you contact a program after you're done interviewing with them via email or phone or whatever? In my personal opinion, and again, the answers that you get will really vary based on the program and based on the person. So for me, I personally would email someone back just to say thank you for taking the time to interview me. And typically when I do that, I include something memorable that happened during that conversation, just so that the person can jog their memory about who I am, because the interviewer sees so many people. It's easy just to get lost in the crowd. So you want to jog their memory and be like, oh yeah, I remember this conversation. So there's that. I personally would email them, but just take it with a grain of salt, because just because they email you back doesn't mean that they're necessarily interested. They could just be being polite. If they don't email you back, again, it doesn't mean that they're not interested. It just could mean that they just don't feel like it's appropriate for them to respond and give false hope if they don't know where they're going to match you or not. So it can go really either way, and I wouldn't read too much into it because you just don't know. And it, depending on the program, I don't think it really impacts your application that much. It's just a nice gesture. And especially if you have any more further questions, or let's say, you don't match, there's a lot of benefits to keeping those lines of communication going. And that's why I would highly recommend doing it. But again, that is my opinion. People won't always agree, and I think ultimately you want to find a program that matches your personality. So if it's your personality to not email them, then that's fine, then don't do it. But if it is your personality to email them and just say something nice, just do it. That's the main thing. Just you should be yourself, and you'll find, your vibe attracts your tribe. So yeah, those are my 3 easy peasy tips on how to do better on your Zoom interviews. If you have any more questions, please comment down in the box below and I will try to get to them. So stay tuned and watch some of my other videos, and hopefully you'll find them helpful. Stay tuned and catch you in the next one. Bye.